No bad news can't play to talk about. That's usually the best way to do it. Well, you guys can move over close. Don't be afraid. I thought it was important following what has been certainly maybe a turbulent period of time through the state budget, the last 100 and something days that impact cities and towns, certainly our city, to just share some comments about where we are and some things that could impact the city budget going forward. Some of them are kind of, I don't say good news, but mitigators as to what we think presently is not the greatest financial situation in the world, and then some things that could exaggerate or have a negative impact on the city budget going forward. And one of the things I think, even to start out with, and I'll clearly spend a lot of time on the state budget, but I think it's important to note that even on Tuesday, we have something that could make, now we're looking at possibly, I think in the release we talk about a number about $13 million is kind of the challenge we have right now in November in Bridgeport. Based on what we anticipated when the governor issued his budget and talked to the mayors and said, I'm going to back up the cities, we need to kind of start to address some of the challenges that cities have, and then the end product that came through, I think, a lot of, as I used the word before, budget turbulence, but a lot of good people coming together ultimately, I think, to produce the best budget that the state could at the time. But it leaves us short. And then if this library referendum goes forward on Tuesday, which would put another couple $1 million strain on the city budget, I think that's not necessarily good news. And I say that, letting you know that I fully support the libraries. And the fact that they sit now with a $2 million accumulated budget surplus, lack what I think is a clear management perspective that shows how they could save money like every other department is not good. So taxpayers could be impacted if that goes forward. So I'm legitimately raising that concern with the public. I'm going to raise it with city council members on Monday and let them know that this is just something on top of shortage of funding from the state of Connecticut that people need to be aware of, need to be concerned about. At the same time, we fully support all the city departments, including the libraries. But what we're looking at in a variety of ways is things that were anticipated, we hope would have come from the state. Some were scaled back. Certainly what they call the revenue sharing to municipalities hurts us substantially in the tune of millions of dollars. There are a variety of other programs that are out there that we can't count on right now that we're hoping, I know CCM's here, and I've talked to some members of our legislative delegation, that hopefully will be corrected. They're at least at best unclear. But some things that seem to be clear are that the state has eliminated the elderly home ownership tax relief program, and that now will be supported by the city in Bridgeport, so that's not going to go away. I don't know whether it's done by mandate or not. My sense is that it is, but we just can't leave that as something where some of our greatest needs are just going to be left holding the bag. There's some issues surrounding the renter rebate program as to whether or not that's going to be funded by the state or not, whether it was intended to be cut or not. That's an open issue that we're asking the legislators to look at as the final kind of clarity comes to the budget that was passed. And there are a couple other issues. One is the state did lift the cap on the mill rate for automobiles from 37 to 39, at least for this year, and I think it goes up beyond that for next year. We're uncertain as to what implications, if any, that may have for Bridgeport mid-year. Certainly an issue we'll discuss with the City Council on Monday, which is one of our last, I think it is our last regularly scheduled council meeting for this term, but it's certainly something that we need to have a discussion about in the overall picture of the city's budget this year. So I say that, but I want to tell you that obviously we knew that even after we set our budget and went through the process, many of our department heads are here, that we were going to begin taking what measures we could right from the beginning of this year. And people have heard me, and they've come at us with all kinds of requests, and respectfully appreciative of the department heads doing their jobs and our city employees doing their jobs with less. I think we've pretty much held the line on pretty much every position request, almost every position request, unless they're urgent or going to save money, on all discretionary, I say all substantial discretionary spending, without overstating. And as a result, I think have set the tone for what is a process whereby we're going to have to do more with less here as we go through the balance of this year, making a commitment not to go out and raise property taxes this year, despite these challenges. There's some good news too, I think, that it's worth noting, although a lot of this doesn't really hit this year. But as you've heard me, when we go around and have the kind of the pleasure on the good side of this stuff, to go out and see things happening in the city that are important for budgetary perspectives on tax-based growth. We have $550 million being invested in our south end. We were there earlier this week. That's tax-based growth. We passed a development project with private money of over $400 million for the Poli and Majestic theaters. That's tax-based growth. We have revenue sources that are being renewed even with our new relationships with others. Building permit fees coming through. We have a proposal for $675 million and direct revenue to the city of Bridgeport if the state of Connecticut saw fit to support us with legislation for an MGM casino on the waterfront right next to Steel Point, which is growing a vertical out of the ground, at least on the RCI side as we talk. So we've got a lot of stuff and others that I could mention if we want to go on and on, but the point of it really was to circle back, talk about budget numbers from the state as they impact Bridgeport, let you know that anything that could exacerbate or make worse our fiscal situation, like raising the taxes, which the library proposal would do if it gets passed, would not be a good calculated move if people want to help us as administration continue to deliver services at the level we're doing now, with less money and hold the line on taxes. So I'm going to turn to Ken Flato if he wants to add anything on any of those points.
Just, the mayor's gap reduction plan is in place. Mr. Quo and I are doing everything we can to make sure that the spending gets reduced, make sure we save money, and try to create any revenue enhancements we can to try to make sure this budget stays balanced, which the mayor's committed to, and as he said, that taxes do not increase.
And CCM's here too, so these are not, I don't know that we're in a unique position per se with cities and towns, but we're in one that now we've got to focus on what we have as far as monies. Hopefully the clarity will come to some of these outstanding issues on a state level, and hopefully they'll come favorable. I know there's some issues with the auto tax and whether that's going to be fully reimbursed or not. There's some the status of certain grant lists with reval and all those kind of things, which is probably too much detail. Unless somebody wants to ask about them, we'll respond to them. But I think the big picture is, we didn't get overfunded this year, to say the least. We're tightening our belt here, and we're taking some actions that are mitigating. Some will be substantial mitigation, some will be small, kind of push we'll pull together, and we'll continue to do what we did last year, which is look to end this year in the black. Questions if anybody wants.
Let's start with the auto tax. What is it now, and are you going to be moving up to the 39 mil if it's less?
Yeah, I think there's some questions on that, and the finance guys can jump in. So the issue. So here's how it fits into Bridgeport's world. It's about $1 million swing on those two gross, and what we'd be in the position to do is we'd have to administer on the second bill. Some adjustments. There'd be some costs associated with that, and it would only be technically probably a one-shot kind of adjustment for this year. In other words, it's not a continuing, because the mill rate for autos changes next year apparently, I guess, under the state law as well. So there's a cost, if you don't mind me putting it in kind of crude terms of business, there's a cost-benefit analysis that's being looked at now, and how much is that worth, and then how does it fit into other costs, other gap closing measures that we're going to take, that we're going to do with a goal towards not compromising services. But I got to tell you, I mean, I support every one of our departments. These department heads know. Some I think need more resources. We're putting more police officers on the street, and commitment to public safety. Commitment remains to hold the line on property taxes as we did this year when we set our budget. But at the same time, to see a runaway train from a department go out and last minute put a referendum on that's going to jack up the mill rate on the people of the city of Bridgeport. At the same time, they've got a surplus. And these other department heads are working hard within their means. It's just not fair to the residents and the taxpayers of the city of Bridgeport.
Mayor or Ken or Nestor, can you? So if we're looking at between 11,
option on an answer.
Yeah, that's whichever one. So if we're looking at between 11 and 15 million, the biggest chunk of that loss is from where?
The MRSA, the municipal aid to the cities, basically.
So in the process of the state reformulating that aid,
Yeah.
it created a stabilization grant, but the amount of that grant is 4 to 5 million less than what it should have been based on the MRSA last year. And then in addition, we obviously had a budget that was somewhat optimistic in terms of the governor's original budget. So that combination caused most of this.
So does that mean you're gonna cut back on any services?
We have very lean, if I could, Mayor, I mean, we have very lean departments right now, and they've gotten leaner over the last 4 months. So, and unfortunately, balanced budgets are important, and we have to. That's a top priority.
So you're gonna cut back on some services?
I don't know what you mean by,
Haven't
I don't know what you
determined-
mean by cut back on services, be a little more clear on the question.
Well, if you're gonna get less money and this money was spoken for, it means something has to go somewhere.
Right, we're gonna do, if you look at how we handled things last year, I know you wouldn't follow this chapter and verse the way kind of we do inside the building or even locally. We look at small and large items that, where we can either get savings or, for instance, this is not uncommon, everybody does it. You look at delayed, for instance, there are positions that people are waiting to fill. We've now delayed those for July, August, September, October. The anticipation was that if we got funded, we'd be able to fill positions. I know this is not good news to department heads, but there's a level of attrition you're able to accumulate through a budget. That's one element. There's also savings, that's department heads, and we'll do this again, to come back with their best ways to save within the budget allocation now, without impacting the level of services. In other words, we're not gonna stop plowing streets, we're not gonna stop patrolling, the fire department's not gonna stop responding to fires. I mean, so, when you say, are you gonna cut services? Departments are gonna have the resources they need to continue to make the commitment to the level of services we have, clearly. But we're gonna save money in the process. We're gonna tighten up in everywhere that we can, and we're gonna do some other things too. We're reissuing bonds, which is gonna save us millions of dollars on debt service, which should impact us favorably as we move forward, not only this year, but over the next 20-something years for the city. So we're doing creative stuff within the confines, and I give our legislative delegation credit for moving that issue forward, despite the budgetary constraints on the state. They've allowed us to, I don't want to say creative, but at least to be effective in how we structure, now restructure, and save interest payments this year and over the next 20 years. So there'll be some favorable budgetary results from singular action like that in the millions.
Mayor, are you gonna be looking for any additional concessions or anything from the unions at this
We're
point?
gonna look at, we haven't sat down yet with our department heads or with the collective team, and I include our union leadership as part of our team. But look, everybody's gonna look at what we can do, I'm sure. And sometimes you don't even ask. We've got the type, frankly, of union leadership that sometimes offers when they're not even asked. They want to be part. They've been, at least since I've been here, part of the solution. So sometimes on the outside it doesn't look like that, but on the inside you get some real good leadership and employees that have stepped up in a variety of ways. Sometimes they're innovative and creative in partnership. So we want everyone to be a part of closing this. We're going to finish the year in the black. We're going to hold the line on taxes. We're not going to compromise services. But, it's not going to be an easy, whatever it is, 5 or 6 or 7 months left.
And maybe if I could add one, there are a couple.
Wait, Brian, is it okay if Ken adds an answer?
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, our legislators and mayors working with them really closely, there are a couple of small things that the state should fix, because there are mistakes in legislation that could cost the city, such as the renter rebate program. That would be another mandate on not just Bridgeport, but other communities, that wasn't intended, and legislators didn't even realize that the language hurt the cities. And then we have the car tax reimbursement. The state always committed to give the city 100% of the change in car tax mill rate, and that's still a question. So if those things improve, then that'll help the situation. If they don't, then actions could get worse.
How is Bridgeport made out with the ECS? Are you happy
ECS
with
actually
that?
is a small plus on the ECS. So I want to give credit to our delegation and the state legislature for that. And I say that, it's good news on that part of it. But you know,
It was flat.
the reporters that know, no, it's a little better than flat. It's like the only slightly up.
There's a line underneath.
More wings than
There's a line underneath that you did not see. They added a line underneath ECS.
But, and I will tell you this, that I mean, there's still this huge gap, on behalf of Bridgeport students that, certainly can't be solved, some would argue, I guess, in 1 year, but needs to be addressed. It follows a court case that's in the state Supreme Court, which is a subsequent court case to one that we raised years ago about the underfunding and the constitutional obligations of the state, to education, public education, to every student. That means equal education, regardless of what community you live in. And if you look at the per pupil expenditures, just by virtue of the amount of money that's allocated, there's a dramatic disparity. And so that's just not just me as a mayor saying that. I mean, it's pretty much agreed and understood.
So your budget gap plan won't involve altering your contribution towards the school system?
If there's more money, if our read of the state money is that there's more, then we'll make the appropriate allocation to the Board of Ed, so they'll have more.
Mayor, our audience wants to know what impact this will have on the schools. Is there anything in immediate or down the
Yeah,
road?
I think that I don't think there's anything negative that's changed with the state budget from where the schools were last week or 2 weeks ago. If there's something good, it's that there might be a little bit more money for schools, not as a result of the state budget. Not a lot, and I really don't want to quote numbers because some of this is still being sorted out. But it looks like it's on the plus side. So whether or not that trickles down to show an impact or not, I think it's going to be hard to say. I think what we could say is there's nothing that's happened that we know of that's negative or going to reduce their funding as a result of the passage of the state budget and signing it by the governor this week.
And if there hadn't been a state budget, that was the issue. We weren't getting the cash flow payments from the state that we need to obviously.
Yeah, in fairness to this whole situation, we take the half a step back and you say, wait a minute, where were we before this? Before the legislators came together, this interim budget, the similar kind of federal case to a continuing resolution, which barely funded things and kind of kept pushing it further into the fiscal year, was at best distressing. I mean, it was where at one point, I think we were not sure, and other communities were not sure, and you heard me rant and rave about this, that ECS funding, which is in millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, that comes in lump sum payments, was not going to be allocated or was not going to be allocated timely. So, okay, Joe, what does that mean? It sounds like a lot of big words. It means that you have cash flow issues. It means that people are there's not going to be money to pay people, teachers and others, and that just was just completely unacceptable. That came almost to a boiling point, about a month ago? And certainly that was remedied by state OPM. So I think that the news is more on the city side. I think the takeaways are that the Board of Ed is probably at least where they were, maybe slightly better. Residential taxpayers, we're not going to raise property taxes. They're going to be, we've made that commitment within this budget to support that. The auto tax cap is slightly raised. The big kind of unfair thing to taxpayers out there is that if the library board gets a referendum that passes a $2 million increase onto them, then they have a chance of their taxes going up. And you don't know where that money's going to go because they already have a $2 million surplus. And I want to protect the taxpayers as much as I support the library and all of our departments in city government.
Mayor, isn't the flip side of that you could just make cuts to the budget? I mean, that's not going to hit. If that referendum is passed, that's not going to impact you until the 2018-2019 fiscal year. So you'll have next
Well,
budget
the strain will be worse. Where would you make the cuts?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Just
you.
tell the department, you tell them, and we'll,
Well, are there places? There's a lot of political appointees working for you. Are there places? Are you committed to going through your office and going through your political appointments and analyzing those to see if basically they all, these are folks that should be on the payroll, or maybe there's savings there?
Yeah, I think we should do that with every department, and we do.
It did. The mayor has less positions than 3 years ago in the city in those areas.
And I know that's kind of, it makes a nice little clip, when you talk to somebody, and you say, oh, you've got a political appointment. I think you have people that do constituency services. Are those the ones that, you're talking about? Is it, it's really not that type of thing. It's a nice thing for a soundbite for, somewhere. But at the end of the day, this administration, I think you know, is lean. If we did a transition, it was 100, if we ultimately add 100 police officers or people in uniform services, you're probably down 100 people in non-uniform services. Some of that was not easy. But no, $2 million would impact substantially residential property taxpayers in the city of Bridgeport, and they need to know that from me, at least my position on it. Because when it happens, if it happens, and I hope that it doesn't, we need to go back to today and say, hey guys, you know, they've got a $2 million surplus. You just voted them in, basically a mill increase, because that's what it says. It's a mill increase to give them $2 million more to spend in I don't know which way. So it's an unfortunate situation, but I think people need, the key is to make people aware of it. To make people aware of what's out there, and that in this difficult budget situation on a local level, not just in Bridgeport, but cities across Connecticut, cities and towns, on a state level, that I support personally libraries, but I don't support a tax increase on the Bridgeport residents under the context that's being put out there. So I just want people to be aware of that.
Did you or your administration have any inkling that the library board was trying to get this referendum passed, and did you have any discussions trying to dissuade them from doing so? None,
and frankly, in the interest of transparency, you know, that runs counter to everything this administration stands for. It's putting out, I think, to people what is going to be. It was something done apparently last minute. I think it's a flaw in the statute, but I also think it's a flaw in process too, and I think people need to be aware of it. So if you know anybody who writes for a newspaper that wants to write about it, it would be a good thing to get it out there.
Hey, Joe, for the record, the letter that I gave on the page is a copy of one of the petition pages, and it shows that Castillo, the councilman, signed the petition on September 6th, and then they held it all this time until we were surprised about a week ago, we heard about it. And just hearing you saying that, you didn't discuss it, no one discussed it. I've been on the blog demanding that a lot of the bloggers who criticize this administration stand up and raise their hand and tell me who signed the petition, and I get nothing but crickets. Crickets sound, okay?
Yeah, if I could
So
say
everybody's hiding, there's
2
a
weeks
cover
ago.
up, this is horrible what they've done.
2 weeks ago, when I
I
presented,
hope it passes so I can go to court with it.
when I presented at the city council budget committee, none of the members had heard about it.
Well, Castillo did sign the
He's
petition.
not, he's not
And
been
you
on
have
the
the
committee.
page there, if the mayor wants a copy, you can have it.
No, appreciate it. Anyone else? Oh, Brian.
Well, let me, when you were at the PSEG event the other day, and I didn't write down specifically what you said, but you had a couple comments about the cities, which seemed to me to imply that you thought that this budget deal shortchanged the cities, perhaps in favor of the suburbs. I mean, can you elaborate a little bit on that? Do you think that a lot of the suburban legislators in crafting this deal, be they Republicans or Democrats, that maybe this budget is more beneficial to the suburbs and to the rural areas than to the big cities in Connecticut?
No, I don't think I meant to imply, I don't think I said that or meant to imply it. So,
Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think that
yeah, I don't think that per se, no. I think that I think at the end of the day, look, at the end of the day, this was a budget that, you know, I'm glad we got a budget. But I have to tell you that, you know, it hurts. It hurts, and we've got to make those, we've got to deal with some of the challenges here. And I'm sure it hurts cities and towns across Connecticut and others, but it's a better product than the interim budget was. So I'm hoping that we can, you know, we'll dig out of this locally. I'm hoping some of the policies that are put in place as we move forward will help support urban centers. I really feel that we need to do more for cities. You've heard me say this. More, not just Bridgeport, Hartford, Waterbury, New Haven. We have the largest populations. We have individuals that have the greatest needs. We provide services to the region. And as a result, the equation is just ridiculous. Mike Tetro from Fairfield, Ken's successor, a couple past, makes the argument that his town is twice as big. They're geographically, 26 or 30 square miles? 33 square miles. We're half of that, with almost half of our property, 40% tax exempt, where we provide the services with the courthouses, with the draft energy plant, with the, all those that compromise our ability to have funding. So I think there has to be a greater recognition of the need. Those legislators that have stood up for that and fought for that, I appreciate. Those that don't get it, I hope we continue to educate them, so that they can be more supportive. We're trying to do our job on a local level. Anyone else? All right, we're good. Thanks very much. Here's a press release if anybody wants a copy of it.